The morning sun cast long shadows across Manhattan's skyline as Victoria Sterling stood before the Whitmore Building. Her camera clicking rapidly. At 28, she had already made a name for herself as one of the city's most passionate historic preservation architects. Her auburn hair caught the light as she documented every detail of the 1920s Art Deco masterpiece that had stood proudly on Fifth Avenue for nearly a century. "Sterling, you need to move along." The security guard's voice interrupted her. "Concentration. This area will be restricted starting tomorrow." Victoria lowered her camera and faced the uniformed man. "I have every right to photograph this building from public property. It's going to be demolished, isn't it?" The guard nodded grimly. "Orders from Cross Industries. The whole block is being cleared for their new development, Cross Industries." The name sent a chill down Victoria's spine. Everyone in New York knew about Damien Cross, the billionaire who built his empire by tearing down the old to make way for the new. At 34, he was one of the youngest and most ruthless businessmen in the country. People whispered about his cold efficiency, how he could destroy lives and livelihoods with a single decision. Victoria packed her camera with determination. She had spent months researching the Whitmore Building, discovering its rich history and architectural significance. The building wasn't just brick and mortar, it was a piece of New York's soul. She wouldn't let it disappear without a fight. The Cross Industries Tower dominated the Manhattan skyline, its glass and steel structure reflecting the clouds above. Victoria felt small as she entered the marble lobby, but her resolve remained strong. She had requested a meeting with Damien Cross himself, though she doubted he would see her. "Miss Sterling," a polished receptionist smiled at her. "Mr. Cross will see you now. 40th floor." Victoria's heart raced as the elevator climbed higher. She had expected to be dismissed or handed off to some junior executive. The fact that Damien Cross agreed to meet her personally was either a good sign or a very bad one. The elevator doors opened to reveal a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows. Overlooking Central Park, behind a massive mahogany desk, sat the man himself. Damien Cross was even more imposing in person than in the business magazines. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his charcoal suit was clearly custom-made. But it was his eyes that caught Victoria's attention. They were a striking shade of green, intelligent and calculating. "Miss Sterling." His voice was deep and controlled as he stood to greet her. "I understand you have concerns about the Whitmore project." Victoria stepped forward, refusing to be intimidated by his presence. "Mr. Cross, that building is a historic landmark. It represents an era of architectural innovation that cannot be replaced." Damien studied her for a moment, his gaze taking in her professional attire and the portfolio she carried. "Please have a seat. Tell me why you think a nearly building is worth more than progress." As Victoria sat across from him, she noticed something unexpected in his expression. Behind the cold businessman facade, there was curiosity. She opened her portfolio and spread photographs across his desk. Whitmore Building was designed by Eleanor Whitmore, one of the first female architects in New York. Look at these details. Victoria pointed to close-up shots of the intricate metalwork and carved stone. Every element tells a story about the craftsmanship and artistry of that era. Damien leaned forward, examining the photographs with genuine interest. "The craftsmanship is impressive, I'll give you that. But Miss Sterling, this building has been mostly vacant for 5 years. The maintenance costs alone are astronomical." "Because the previous owners didn't understand its value," Victoria replied passionately. "With proper restoration, it could house boutique offices, art galleries, or even luxury apartments while maintaining its historic character. You could create something unique instead of another generic glass tower." For a moment, silence filled the office. Damien continued studying the photographs, his expression unreadable. Victoria watched him carefully, noting how his stern features softened slightly when he looked at the architectural details. "You're very passionate about this," he said finally, his eyes meeting hers. "Most people who come to see me want something. For themselves, money, contracts, favors. You're asking me to potentially lose millions to save old stones and metal." Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks. Those old stones and metal represent human creativity and history. Once they're gone, they're gone forever. Your development will be just another building in a city full of buildings. But the Whitmore is irreplaceable. Damien leaned back in his chair, still watching her intently. You realize I could have you removed from the premises right now. I could proceed with demolition tomorrow, and there's nothing you could do about it. You could, Victoria agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. But I don't think you will. Why not? Because you wouldn't have agreed to see me if you weren't at least curious about what I had to say. And because I can see in your eyes that those photographs affected you. Damien's lips curved into the slightest smile. You're very observant, Miss Sterling. Very bold to speak to me so directly. Speak the truth, Mr. Cross. People may fear you in the business world, but I'm not here as a businesswoman. I'm here as someone who cares about preserving beauty and history. Standing up, Damien walked to the windows overlooking the city. Do you know how I built this company, Miss Sterling? By making hard decisions that others couldn't make. By being willing to tear down the old and inefficient to make room for the new and better. Victoria joined him at the window, standing close enough to catch the subtle scent of his cologne. But what if sometimes the old is already better? What if progress doesn't always mean replacement? Damien turned to face her, and Victoria was struck by how tall he was. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're asking me to change my entire philosophy based on one building. I'm asking you to consider that maybe your philosophy could evolve, Victoria replied softly. Great leaders adapt when presented with new information. For several heartbeats, they stood there looking at each other. Victoria felt an unexpected electricity in the air between them. Damien's eyes seemed to be seeing her not just as an obstacle to his plans, but as a woman who had challenged him in a way no one else ever had. Miss Sterling, he said slowly, I'm going to make you an offer. Give me 1 week to evaluate the building personally. If you can convince me that restoration is truly viable, both financially and practically, I'll consider changing the project. Victoria's heart leaped. Really? You'll actually consider it? I'll consider it, Damien confirmed. But I have conditions. You'll work with my team to assess every aspect of the building. Structural integrity, renovation costs, potential returns. Everything must be completely transparent. Of course, Victoria agreed quickly. I have all my research ready, and I know contractors who specialize in historic restoration. Damien extended his hand to her. I'm going to have a deal, Miss Sterling. 1 week. As Victoria shook his hand, she felt that same electric sensation she had noticed before. His hand was warm and strong, and he held hers just a moment longer than necessary. When their eyes met again, she saw something new in his expression. Respect. I should warn you, Damien said as he released her hand. I don't often change my mind once it's made up. Victoria smiled, feeling more confident than she had since entering his office. Then, this should be an interesting week for both of us. Mr. Cross. As she gathered her photographs and prepared to leave, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just begun. She had come here to save a building, but she sensed that the real story was just starting to unfold. The following. Monday morning arrived with an unexpected autumn chill that made Victoria pull her coat tighter as she approached the Whitmore Building. She had spent the weekend preparing detailed restoration proposals, cost analyses, and historical documentation. Her small apartment had looked like a research library explosion, with papers covering every surface. Damien Cross was already waiting for her outside the building, dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater instead of his usual business suit. The casual attire made him appear younger and somehow more approachable, though no less commanding. Victoria felt her pulse quicken as she walked toward him. Good morning, Miss Sterling, he greeted her, his breath visible in the cool air. Ready to show me what makes this place so special? Absolutely, Victoria replied, pulling out an old brass key. The current owners gave me access for the assessment. I think you'll be surprised by what we find inside. As they entered the lobby, Victoria watched Damien's reaction carefully. Space was dusty and showed signs of neglect. But the original marble floors and hand-painted ceiling murals were still magnificent. Damien stopped in the center of the room, slowly turning to take in the details. The ceiling work is remarkable, he admitted, his voice echoing in the empty space. I hadn't expected such artistry. Victoria felt a surge of hope. Wait until you see the upper floors. Eleanor Whitmore designed each level with different themes and purposes. The third floor was meant to house artists' studios, so it has the most incredible natural light. They spent the morning exploring every corner of the building. Victoria explained the significance of each architectural element, while Damien examined structural details with the eye of someone who truly understood construction. She noticed how he ran his hands along carved woodwork, testing the craftsmanship with obvious appreciation. "The bones of this building are incredibly solid," Damien observed as they climbed the original staircase. "This ironwork is better than anything we could produce today." Eleanor Whitmore believed in building for centuries, not decades, Victoria explained. She wanted her buildings to become more beautiful with age, not fall apart. On the third floor, sunlight streamed through tall windows, creating patterns on the hardwood floors. Damien walked to one of the windows and looked out at the city below. "The light really is extraordinary up here," he said quietly. "I can see why artists would want to work in this space." Victoria joined him at the window, acutely aware of his presence beside her. Imagine what this could become again. Not just office space, but a place where creativity flourishes. "We could restore the artist studios, maybe add a gallery on the ground floor." Damien turned to study her profile as she gazed out at the street below. "You really see the potential, don't you? Not just the building as it is, but what it could become." "Don't you?" Victoria asked, meeting his eyes. "I know you're known for creating new things. Surely you can appreciate the value of bringing something historic back to life." For a moment, Damien was quiet. Then he said something that surprised her. "My grandfather was a carpenter. Data. Used to restore old furniture, bringing antiques back to their original beauty. I remember watching him work when I was young, how carefully he preserved every original detail." Victoria felt her heart skip. This was the first personal thing Damien had shared with her. "What changed your mind about restoration?" Damien's expression grew distant. "Life, I suppose. The business world taught me that holding on to the past was expensive and inefficient. I learned to focus only on the future, on what would generate the highest returns." "But you still remember your grandfather's work," Victoria said softly. "Some part of you must understand why preservation matters." They were standing closer now, and Victoria could see flecks of gold in Damien's green eyes. She realized that, beneath his reputation as a ruthless businessman, there was someone who had once appreciated craftsmanship and beauty. "Miss Sterling," Damien said, his voice lower than usual, "you're making this decision much more complicated than it should." "Be, Victoria," she corrected. "And maybe complicated isn't always bad. Maybe it means you're considering all the possibilities instead of just the obvious ones." Damien smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "Victoria, that suits you better than Miss Sterling." They spent the afternoon with Damien's structural engineer and architect, examining every aspect of the building's condition. Victoria was impressed by how thoroughly Damien questioned every detail, how he insisted on understanding not just the costs, but the craftsmanship involved in proper restoration. "The foundation is remarkably sound," the engineer reported. "Proper restoration, this building could easily last another century." "And the estimated costs?" Damien asked. "Significant, but not prohibitive for a project of this caliber. The real question is whether the finished product will provide adequate returns." Victoria held her breath as Damien considered the numbers. She could see him calculating, weighing financial projections against other factors he hadn't considered before. "What about mixed use?" Damien asked suddenly. "Boutique office spaces on the lower floors, luxury residential units above. Maybe that gallery Victoria mentioned on the ground level." Victoria's heart soared. He was actually considering alternatives, thinking creatively about how to make the project work. "That could be very profitable," his architect agreed. "The historic character would command premium prices, and the location is perfect for that market." As the day wound down, Victoria found herself walking with Damien through the empty building. One more time. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, giving the space an almost magical quality. "You know," Damien said as they paused in the main lobby, "I haven't enjoyed a project this much in years. Usually, development is just numbers and timelines. This feels different, because you're creating something meaningful instead of just profitable," Victoria suggested. Damien looked at her thoughtfully. Is it possible to do both? To create something meaningful that also makes financial sense? I think you're starting to prove that it is, Victoria replied. They stood facing each other in the fading light, and Victoria felt the air between them, charged with an energy that had nothing to do with architecture or business deals. Damien stepped closer, his eyes searching her face. Victoria, he said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer, of course. Is this just about the building for you, or is there something else happening here? Victoria's breath caught. She had been trying to ignore the growing attraction she felt toward Damien, telling herself it was just the excitement of potentially saving the Whitmore. But standing there in the golden light, with him looking at her like she was the most interesting thing he had ever encountered, she couldn't deny what she was feeling. I came here to save a building, she said honestly. But somewhere along the way, this became about much more than architecture. Damien reached up and gently touched her cheek. I was hoping you'd say that, because I can't stop thinking about it. You, Victoria? About your passion, your conviction, the way you see beauty where others see only obstacles? Damien, Victoria whispered, her heart racing. I know this complicates everything, he continued. I know people will say you're just trying to influence my decision. I'm just another businessman taking advantage of his position. Victoria placed her hand over his. Do you care what people say? I never have before, Damien admitted. I care about what you think. I care about being worthy of your respect. You already have it, Victoria said softly. You've shown me that there's so much more to you than your reputation suggests. Damien leaned closer, and Victoria felt her breath catch as she realized he was going to kiss her. But instead, he rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. One more day, he said quietly. Give me one more day to make sure I'm making this decision for the right reasons. I need to know that saving this building is the right choice, independently of what's happening between us. Victoria nodded, understanding his need to separate business from personal feelings. One more day. As they left the building together, Victoria felt something fundamental had shifted between them. The intimidating billionaire who had terrified business rivals was showing her a vulnerable side that she suspected few people ever saw. And tomorrow, she would discover if the man she was falling for was strong enough to change everything he thought he knew about success. The city lights were beginning to twinkle. As Damien walked Victoria to her car, both of them knowing that whatever happened next would change both of their lives forever. The next morning brought unexpected drama that would test everything Victoria and Damien had built together. Victoria arrived at the Whitmore Building to find protesters gathered. Outside, holding signs reading, Save Our History and Cross Industries Destroys Dreams. News vans lined the street. And reporters were interviewing anyone willing to speak about the controversial demolition. Victoria's phone buzzed. It the text from Damien. Emergency board meeting called. Media attention has investors concerned. Meet me at my office at 2 p.m. Her heart sank. She knew that negative publicity could force Damien's hand, regardless of his personal feelings about the project. The business world he operated in didn't leave room for sentiment or romance at Cross Industries. Victoria could feel the tension the moment she stepped off the elevator. Damien's assistant, Patricia, looked stressed as she led Victoria to a conference room. The board meeting just ended, Patricia explained quietly. It didn't go well. Mr. Cross is in his office, but I should warn you, he's not in the best mood. Victoria knocked on Damien's office door and entered to find him standing. At his windows, his shoulders rigid with tension. He was back in his formal business suit, and the casual warmth she had seen yesterday seemed to have disappeared. The board is furious, Damien said without turning around, calling the project a public relations nightmare. 3 major investors have threatened to pull funding from future developments if we don't proceed with the original demolition plan. Victoria felt her heart breaking, not just for the building, but for the man in front of her. What did you tell them? Damien finally turned to face her, and she could see the conflict in his eyes. I told them I needed more time to evaluate all options. They gave me 48 hours to make a final decision. And what are you thinking? Victoria asked, though she dreaded the answer. Damien walked to his desk and picked up a folder thick with financial projections. I'm thinking that I've built this company by making smart business decisions, not emotional ones. The numbers for restoration are good, but the risks are significant. Victoria felt anger rising in her chest. So that's it? After everything we discovered yesterday, after seeing what that building could become, you're just going to tear it down because it's the safe choice? Don't make this about yesterday, Damien said sharply. Don't make this about us. This is business, Victoria. It has to be. Does it? Victoria challenged, stepping closer to his desk. Or are you just scared that for the first time in your life, you might make a decision based on something other than profit margins? Damien's eyes flashed with anger. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I have shareholders, employees, contracts. I can't risk everything on a romantic notion. About old buildings? Romantic notion? Victoria's voice rose. That building represents everything you told me you once valued. Your grandfather's appreciation for craftsmanship, for bringing beauty back to life. When did you become so afraid of following your heart? A win. Following my heart became a luxury I couldn't afford, Damien shot back. You think this is easy for me? You think I want to tear down that building after seeing what it could become? And don't, Victoria said simply. Be brave enough to fight for what you believe in. Damien stared at her for a long moment, his jaw clenched. And if the company suffers, if I lose investors and have to lay off employees, is your precious building worth that? Victoria felt tears threatening, but she held his gaze. I can't answer that for you, Damien. Only you can decide. What kind of man you want to be? The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and broken dreams. Finally, Victoria turned toward the door. Where are you going? Damien asked. To do what I should have done from the beginning, Victoria replied without looking. Back. Fight for what I believe in, with or without you. Victoria spent the rest of the day and most of the night working on something she had never attempted before, a complete development proposal that would satisfy both preservation goals and investor demands. She called in favors from contractors, architects, and financial advisors, working to create a plan that would make the Whitmore restoration not just viable, but irresistibly profitable. By dawn, she had a comprehensive presentation that reimagined the building as a luxury mixed-use development with boutique offices, high-end residential units, and a ground-floor gallery space that would become a cultural destination. The numbers were compelling, the timeline realistic, and the projected returns exceeded even Damien's original development plans. Victoria arrived at Cross Industries at 7 a.m. Knowing Damien would already be at his desk, she found him exactly where she expected, looking like he hadn't slept much either. His hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and empty coffee cups littered his desk. Victoria, he said, surprise evident in his voice. What are you doing here so early? I brought you something, she said, placing her proposal on his desk. A reason to be brave. Damien looked at the thick document, then back at her. What is this? Complete development plan for the Whitmore Building. That will make your investors very happy while preserving everything that makes it special. I worked all night to put this together. Damien began flipping through the pages, his expression growing more interested with each section. These profit projections, are they accurate? Every number has been verified by 3 different sources, Victoria assured him. The restoration will cost more up front, but the returns will be 30% higher than your original plan over 5 years. The pre-leasing commitments, Damien continued reading. You already have tenants lined up. Victoria nodded. Boutique law firms, architectural offices, design studios, everyone wants unique space with character. And the residential units will command premium prices because of the historic significance. Damien was quiet for several minutes as he studied the proposal. Victoria watched his face, seeing the businessman in him evaluating every detail while something else, something softer, appreciated the vision she had created. This is incredible work, he said finally. You did all this in one night. I had motivation, Victoria replied. I wanted to show you that sometimes the right choice and the smart choice can be the same thing. Damien stood up and walked around his desk to face her. Victoria, about yesterday, what I said. You were scared Victoria interrupted gently. I understand that. Building an empire requires tough decisions, and you've trained yourself to prioritize logic over emotion. But sometimes the best decisions come from both. Damien reached for her hands, and Victoria felt that familiar electricity when he touched her. I spent all night thinking about what you said, about what kind of man I want to be. And what did you decide? I decided that I want to be the kind of man who's worthy of a woman like you. Someone who can build something meaningful, not just profitable. Someone who honors the past while creating the future. Victoria felt her heart soar. Does that mean? It means I'm going to save the Whitmore Building, Damien said firmly. And I'm going to use your proposal to convince the board that it's the smartest business decision we could make. Really? Victoria could hardly believe what she was hearing. Really? Damien confirmed, his hands sliding up to cup her face. And after we save the building, I want to talk about saving something else. What's that? Us, Damien said softly. I want to see where this goes, Victoria. I want to build something with you that's even more beautiful than what we're creating. With the Whitmore, Victoria felt tears of joy prick her eyes. Are you sure? I'm not exactly the type of woman usually seen with billionaire businessmen. Damien smiled, and Victoria saw all the warmth and humor that had been hidden beneath his corporate facade. You're exactly the type of woman I need. Someone who challenges me, who makes me want to be better, who sees possibilities where others see only obstacles. I love you too, Victoria whispered, realizing that the words were true even as she spoke them. Damien's kiss was everything Victoria had imagined and more. Filled with passion and promise and the excitement of new beginnings, when they finally broke apart, both were breathless. So what happens now? Victoria asked. Now we go save a building, Damien said with a grin. And then we start building our own future together. 6 months later, the Whitmore Building reopened to tremendous fanfare. The restoration had been even more successful than Victoria's projections, with every office and residential unit leased before construction was complete. The ground floor gallery featured an exhibition about the building's history and Eleanor Whitmore's pioneering architectural work. Victoria stood in the main lobby, now beautifully restored to its original grandeur, watching the opening night celebration. The space was filled with artists, business leaders, and city officials, all marveling at what had been accomplished, admiring your handiwork. Damien appeared beside her, looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. Victoria, corrected, leaning into his embrace. We did this together. Yes, we did, Damien agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. And I have a proposal for our next project. Victoria turned in his arms, eyebrow raised playfully. Another building to save? Something like that, Damien said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Dropped to one knee right there in the crowded lobby, pulling out a ring box that made Victoria gasp. Victoria Sterling, he said, his voice carrying over the party noise. You saved more than just a building. You saved me. Will you marry me and help me build something that will last even longer than the Whitmore? The entire lobby had gone quiet, all eyes on them. Victoria looked down at the man who had gone from intimidating billionaire to the love of her life, and her answer came without hesitation. Yes, she said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, absolutely yes. As Damien slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, the crowd erupted in applause. Victoria realized that she had set out to save one beautiful old building and had ended up finding something even more precious, a love that would create beauty for generations to come. In the months that followed, Damien transformed his business philosophy completely, focusing on developments that honored both progress and preservation. Victoria became his partner in every sense, and together they built an empire based not just on profit, but on creating spaces where beauty and functionality coexisted. The Whitmore Building became the flagship of their new approach. Proof that the past and future could work together to create something extraordinary. And every day, as Victoria walked through its restored halls, she was reminded that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the courage to fight. For what truly matters, their love story became as legendary as the building that brought them together, inspiring others to believe that even the most unlikely romances could create foundations strong enough to last forever. The end.